We are on chapter 27. I'll say this every single day of this week, but it feels amazing that we committed ourselves to going through the book of Proverbs. So it's been 6 weeks, and this Friday will be our last day in Proverbs. But I have a lot of other things that I've been cooking in the back for what we're going to do after Proverbs. So stay tuned for that. But the wisdom of Proverbs is it is a book that I highly recommend that you read at different stages of life, right? When I read this as a 13-year-old, I saw something else. As a 24-year-old, something else. As a 40-year-old, I'm seeing something else. As a 50-year-old, I'll see something else, right? So at different stages of life, you're going to see different elements of this book. You might read it as a young man, a simple man, a wise man, a man of understanding. And it's important that we don't lose sight of what is the audience that I'm a part of when I'm reading it. Because when you are part of a certain audience, you will pick up certain things. So chapter 27, verse 1, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. Let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. A stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than both of them. Wrath is cruel and anger a torrent, but who's able to stand before jealousy? Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but kisses of the enemy are deceitful. A satisfied soul loads the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. Like a bird that wanders from its nest. One sec. Let me share my screen again. And if you guys can see it. All right, cool. Like a bird that wanders from its nest is a man who wanders from his place. Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, nor go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. A lot of content here. Let's unpack it. For one, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. If you can read the book of James, that's actually considered sin, all right? Because you are assuming the place of God for you to know this is what I'm going to do. This is what's going to happen. And the right way to say that, it's not saying, like, for instance, if I said, all right, like next week, I'm planning to do this. In one dimension, it is sin because of the intention and the nature or the position of my heart. But in another way, it can't be sin. Lord willing, next week, I would love to be able to go ahead and create that. Lord willing, right? Because you are putting yourself in a position where you recognize God's authority. You recognize He is the one that He's the arbiter of your future, not yourself. As much as you would like to be that, you're not in complete charge. And so do not boast about tomorrow because you don't know what next Saturday brings, right? Who knows? Next Monday might be your last day on earth and you're not even aware of it, because it is the most frightening thing when I have seen young people like pass away. And I guarantee you that the week before they were not thinking that next Friday or next Wednesday would have been their last day on this earth. And it's gone like in a snap. And so when you live, but at the same time, living every single day with eternity stamped on your eyeballs is critical, because when you're constantly in the pursuit of eternity, what you realize is that every single day has to be lived in light of that, right? And so and it's like, don't worry about tomorrow. You can't go and change the past, but what you can do is be the light of the world and the salt of the earth and be someone that is ready to make kingdom impact. If today's my last day, then so be it. I'm happy. I'm out of here. Like, that's the attitude that one must carry going into life. And it allows you to be a lot more impactful than, like, the other side of the spectrum, which is like, one day God's coming back, or God's coming back soon, so I'm not going to do anything, right? Because Jesus says, occupy till I come. So that's super important, because let's not boast about what we can do and boast about what God has done in your past and the testimonies of what He is doing, right? Not about what's about to happen in the future, because Lord willing, should be the prefix of every statement that follows a statement about the future, that you're planning to do something or going to do something, because anything outside of that is sin. Let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips, right? At the end of the day, like let other people see what you are good at, right? And let them like honor you, right? Like for instance, the other day, right? Like, it was I was trading Jordan and he crushed it in terms of the sales side of things. And it was let another man praise you and not your own mouth and not your own lips. And he didn't even realize that he was a natural and he did so well at it. But what happens is that the honor that comes from that is so much more deeper than if someone were to say, "Oh, look at me, I'm so good at sales," right? Right? There's a sense of where you cannot truly receive correction when you're in that attitude, right? It's a twofold coin here. If you are praising yourself, number one, you're incapable of seeing what's wrong because there's bias, right? When you let other people do it, what happens is they not only will praise you, but you're also giving yourself room for growth. If someone asks you on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think you are? I'm a 10. All right, cool. That means you can't grow anymore, right? Let someone answer that. Hey, I honestly think he's like a 7. He still has like 3 more points to grow. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, honestly, I believe that I'm a 1 out of 10. Why? Because I have a lot more to grow in life. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, positioning yourself in a way that you can't see, you have so much bias towards what you're good at that you're not having room for improvement or room for growth, whether it's in business, whether it's in sales, whether it's in marriage, whatever domain of life that you're a part of. If that's the kind of mindset you have, it's really detrimental long term. So really digest that. The next thing, a stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than both of them. Wrath is cruel and an anger torrent, but who's able to stand before jealousy? So two elements that we're seeing here: wrath and we're seeing jealousy, right? Wrath in itself is a component that is associated with foolishness. You will see this. The ability to control your emotions is more powerful than someone that's controlling a city, right? A fortified city. So if wisdom is indicative of the ability to control one's emotion and to have a fortified city, then foolishness is the counterpart. It's the opposite. And so a control of emotions is associated with wisdom. A loss of emotions and just raging wrath is associated with foolishness. All right. And at the end of the day, like you will notice when you're feeling that. I feel incessant anger towards this person, right? And it's a sign that there is still foolishness inside because two analogies that you guys should never forget. Number one, when you are angry with someone and you're wrathful towards someone, it is the equivalent of holding a hot coal, right? You are and not throwing it because the only person that's getting burnt is you. Only a fool would hold a hot coal and not throw it and only burn himself. Number one. Number two, when the water is moving, you cannot see your reflection inside of it, right? If you've ever tried looking into a lake or a pond, when the water is moving, you can't see a reflection. The water has to be still in order for you to see clearly. It's so the same way it is when you're worked up and you're all upset and like in a bad mood, like what you do in those moments could really screw you up. But you got to calm down until the water becomes so clear that you could see, not from fumes. And so that allows you to be someone as a person of wisdom that's controlling their emotions, right? But on that note, the other thing that's mentioned is jealousy. Like, folks, I can't stress this enough. If you got jealous people in your life, get out. There, it is. I've dealt with a lot of jealousy in my life, and it is not fun. It is not a pretty thing to be around, right? Jealousy is a very toxic emotion. It is dangerous. Jealousy and envy, right? And there's a thing in Eastern and Jewish, Arabic, Indian, Asian culture. There's this idea called the evil eye, right? It's a whole superstition. It's the idea that when you're doing well, someone puts an evil eye on you, which is they wish ill intent towards you, and it's not even conscious at times. It's a feeling of like almost this like it's a sinful state of dissatisfaction towards the other person's success. I've dealt with people like that multiple times in my life. And, one of the things maybe it was in my naivety of my youth, I said, let them keep their evil eye. I'll be fine. I have the favor of the Lord. I don't care what they do. Right. Yeah. I seem like a reckless little kid that probably had to have more angels than necessary because of being reckless like that. But at the same time, that's not wisdom, right? Wisdom is recognizing where there is jealousy and avoiding it, right? And concealing it. Like, you'll know there are people in your life you could share phenomenal truth with, like things that God is doing in your life, things that God has done, even be as transparent as possible, and they will still stand up for you. They will encourage you. They will try to lift you up. They'll try to drag you even further into the goodness of what God has for you. But on the same note, there are people that when you share what God is doing, you'll see their reaction. You can sense it. I would say, how do I put it? All of you guys are spiritual beings in the sense that God has given you not only physical senses, he's given you spiritual senses. To deny that is to deny the very essence of your existence. So the fact that you are a spiritual being allows you to sense certain things in certain environments. That is why when you walk into a room and there has been a massive fight, you will sense that the two people have fought because the atmosphere is thick. In the same way, when you share something with somebody and there is almost like a jealousy or an envy, you will pick that up. Just pay very close attention and you can sense it. Like there's a sense of and it comes from a certain place. Like they look at their life and they're not seeing progress or growth, or things that are happening well for them, and they see that in someone else and they feel almost like a sadness in their own heart for their own life, but that's connected to a jealousy of that. It comes from a discontentment of your own circumstances that creates like a weird feeling towards what the other person is having, right? Remember, jealousy, covetousness, what does it come from? It comes from a place of lack. It comes from a place of not having. Meaning, if you are walking in a life of lack and a life of scarcity, when you see God blessing other people, there is a tendency for you to feel something weird, right? And you got to check your heart when that happens. Like, wow, like this is not good. This is not healthy. I should be desiring the good for this person, not in some shape looking at my lack and feeling a certain emotion towards that individual. And so and the thing is, once God reveals it to you, whether it's by your intuition, whether it's by dreams or visions, avoid such persons, right? Because there is a long-term destruction that happens in those environments. And I say that from personal experience, right? I say that from it's a wisdom to realize that it's not good to just marinate yourself with 100 people that are jealous and think that, everything's going to be sunflower and it's like all sunshine and flowers, right? Or whatever the phrase is. Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. A satisfied soul loads the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul, even every bitter thing is sweet. So I've had times where I had to correct people that are really close to my lives, friends, family. And at the end of the day, I don't mind doing the correction because I would much rather be in a position where, or even be corrected if I'm doing something AWOL, right? I would much rather be in a position to do that than to tell them that everything is okay, right? And so what is an enemy, right? What does an enemy do? Why do you have an enemy? What is the philosophical question? What's an enemy? It's someone that has a negative opposition towards you, and in some cases even seeks your ill demise, right? So if you see someone in your life that's going a certain path, right? It doesn't have to be they're going the path of addiction and the path of sexual immorality or the path of what's that called murder or crazy things like that. It doesn't have to be that. It can be via the path of it can be in the 1 second here. It can be the path of someone that is stuck in their own false beliefs or their false thought patterns, right? They may not like it. They may think it's rude. They might think it's what's that called condescending, but if correction is necessary to steer them from the path of destruction, then that's what a loving friend does. But if I don't do that, what is an enemy? They are having opposite intentions towards you, and they are seeking your demise. That means if I see something and I'm not addressing it, I am being an enemy to that person. Meaning I know that person will go down. They keep doing what they've been doing. They're going to keep getting what they've been getting, and the quality of their life never changes, and I'm okay with that. Like, that's a problem, right? So it's much better to have people that tell you straight up, yo, bro, like, or sister, like this is really out. You're really out of pocket here. Like we got to talk about this. Versus someone that doesn't say anything, and then you tend to find out from people that are not your friends, and it becomes a mess. So, a satisfied soul loads the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet, right? Like a bird that wanders from his nest is a man who wanders from his place. Many things here. A satisfied soul loads the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet, right? Someone that is satisfied, like when you're full, I'll give you another analogy. When you're full and you've eaten the food, how many folks here know that when somebody brings or shows an advertisement of food, a picture of a food or whatever, like you don't want to see it. Why? Because you just ate. You had a big meal. You don't want to think about food. You don't want to look at food, right? It's the same thing with the aspects of the soul, right? Because, you know, when your soul is satisfied, the world can't bring you anything else. The only satisfaction you will ever find is in the person of Christ Jesus. If your soul is not satisfied in Christ, you will find it in money, you will find it in sex, you will find it in fleeting pleasures. Whatever it is that your mind is thinking is like a bit, it is the equivalent of what's called a hungry person, where even the bitter things are sweet to him, because you haven't found the living water for your soul. You haven't found the rose of Sharon. You haven't found him who is eternally satisfying. And so you will pursue everything else other than him, right? Because your soul has never been satisfied, right? So even bitter things become sweet. Even the fleeting pleasures of this world become sweet to you. And so remember, there's this whole age-old thing. Do you have a God-sized hole in your heart that only God could fill? And if you're not going to put God in that position, you can throw whatever you want at it and it will never be satisfied. So super powerful there to realize, what is it that satisfies your soul? Like, if all the stuff that I have and all that God's done in my life is taken away, the one consistent thing that I've noticed is having the relationship with God and the person of God is the only thing that brings true satisfaction and true contentment. All the other stuff is just things. Like, what is that going to do for me? Right? And that's why, like, like dangling things, it's like it doesn't have any effect, right? Because it's like, even a honeycomb is disgusting if you're satisfied. So very important. Are you satisfied with the person of God and the person of Christ? Or if you're not, then that's where you need to connect with him. Like a bird that wanders from his nest is a man who wanders from his place. What is a place? It's not just your home, right? Of course, when you leave home, you tend to feel a certain way, but your place could be many things, right? It can be your identity. It can be your work. We've been talking about work quite a bit for the past few days, right? It doesn't have to be your home. Like a bird that wanders from his nest is a man who wanders from his place. Remember how people say, stay in your lane, right? When you leave your identity, you're not staying in your lane, right? And it's the equivalent of a bird that's far away from its nest. You're going to be very lost if you're not walking in the name that God calls you, in the identity that God has put on your life. Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by a hearty counsel. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, nor go to your brother's house in a day of calamity. Better is a neighbor than a brother far away. So we have people in our life that are blood related, and we have people in our life that are spirit related. The people that are blood related, like I have more people strangely in my life right now that are spirit related than blood related, right? And it better is to go to a spirit related man's house than a blood related man's house far away, right? Because it's not, even though they're quote unquote blood related, the fact that the relationship is completely different, right? And it's it creates a sense of there is, especially if you read this in the context of the Jewish culture and like that whole Eastern perspective, there is a sense of like you saw that with Esau and Jacob, right? There is a bit of competition there, right? And coming from an Indian family, like thankfully I don't have this with my brother, right? But like I've seen this growing up where competition tends to exist between um between families, right? My kids are like this, your kids are like that. I've done this. Like it's like keeping up with the Joneses at a micro level. And it's of course it exists in America, but it's not blood. It might be neighbors, right? It can also be family. But the wisdom here is you will know, just to simplify it, you will know the kind of people that you can rely on, the people that you can trust and go to, right? They are more likely to honor you than if you were to go to someone just because they're family that will dishonor you. So that's just something to always keep in the back of our minds going through that. So going into verse 11, my son, be wise and make my heart glad that I may answer him who reproaches me. A prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. The simple ones pass on and are punished. Now, for those who've been tracking with me for a few weeks here, y'all remember that I said this before, right? Well, I did, and the book of Proverbs said it before. It's whenever the book is repeating something, it's time we like pay attention. Because a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. The simple ones are passed on and they're punished. So what is a prudent man? He sees a danger ahead and does something to avert it. People that are not prudent, they're just gonna walk right in it and get completely destroyed. And what is a modern day thing like the reading between the lines, like for instance, it requires a wisdom element to see like a person is not liking of you or has a displeasure for you, especially if they are over you, right? And if you can't see that someone over you does not like you, right, or has displeasure for you, what happens is something very dangerous. You're going to be a simple man that just walks and then gets killed. But a prudent man is able to perceive, like, that guy he's not really fond of me, so I better be careful, right? I've seen this with previous companies and stuff like that. Like, it's just walking right into destruction. And so it requires a sense of wisdom to where you're able to foresee the danger and hide yourself or remove yourself or have a contingency plan in place. And the simple pass on and are punished. Take the garment of him who is surety for stranger and hold it in pledge when he's a surety for a seductress. So take the garment. So when you become a surety for someone, right, it's the equivalent of the age-old thing. Like, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man a fish, you feed him for life, right? Take the garment of him who is a surety for a stranger, right? When you become a surety for a stranger, for Proverbs has said this like 5 times at this point, but when you become a surety for a stranger, you tend to lose all that you have, right? And so it's very important to develop that understanding. Like at the end of the day, it's not saying like if someone is in need of help, don't help somebody, right? There's a different attitude. Being a surety and being someone that's helping someone is a completely different context, right? It's an attitude where you position yourself under leveraged. You position yourself to lose, right? And another thing is what I'm observing when I read this is like when you're making a surety, like you're saying, all right, I'll do this or whatever. And there's almost like a loan transaction. Like if you like didn't make payments on your car, they'll repossess your car, right? That seems to be the context here. And it might be even talking about like, going and taking loans or something of that nature where you're saying, hey, like I'll make the payments. You're being a surety to the bank, right? That you'll make the payments. And if you don't, then you lose whatever you have, right? And so you find yourself in a worse position than you started because it said previously in Proverbs, don't be a surety to strangers. He who blesses his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it will be counted a curse to him, right? It's hilarious. But there is this thing where, loud sounds in the morning are just, it is not something that someone wants to be woken up to, right? it is very annoying. Like for, I've talked with parents, like when kids wake up and they're running and screaming and stomping, like it's like it's like waking up to a flashbang in war, right? You're trying to get your bearings and you're not knowing what's happening, right? That's why I said it'll be counted a curse. So, at the end of the day, like recognize that for if you're someone that has a roommate, or if you're someone that's a spouse, or if you are someone that is like in a position where you're trying to get a hold of somebody, like there should be almost like an awareness to be like, awesome, like this is super early in the morning, let me not create some commotion, right? Because he may not like it. And that's just a wisdom element, right? But it's requiring us part of a self-awareness, right? He who blesses his friend with a loud voice. I can already imagine the scene in ancient Israel. Guys walking, the sun is rising in the morning, everyone is like laying in their beds, and then there's this one man that's had his cup of tea in the morning, and he's walking and just loudly screaming, making noise, and like before even the rooster makes a sound, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, like what the heck, dude, like I was asleep, I can't go back to sleep now. And it's like the whole day goes to Hades in a handbasket. But that's the awareness that we need to have, right? At the end of the day, what you have to realize is a lack of self-awareness could be your detriment. So a continual dripping on a very rainy day and a contentious woman are like, this is like the fourth or fifth time that we're seeing this about a contentious woman and continual dripping, right? Now, it doesn't have to be a woman. It could be a man. That's what I've been saying since the beginning, right? We see the seductress. The seductress does not have to be a female. It could be a male, right? And it's representing a personality type, right? But for some reason they're presenting it in the nature in the nature of like a relationship with a man and a woman, and the woman is being a continual dripping. But in some relationships, the women are chill and the men are like that, right? And so what are we hearing here? Like, don't be someone that is just like nagging somebody, right? What that does is it's the equivalent of continual dripping that annoys you. Like you don't want to hear that anymore. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind and grasps oil with his right hand, right? So hilarious. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind. Like trying to restrain someone like that is trying to get hold of the wind. Like it's near impossible, right? And trying to grasp oil with his right hand. Like just imagine trying to grasp oil with your right hand. That imagery is the equivalent of trying to restrain a contentious person. As iron sharpens an iron, so man sharpens the countenance of his friend, right? We've all used this phrase, heard this verse, but it's found right here, 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. We are in other people's lives. The intention of this Bible study is so that there is a transfer of wisdom and understanding. And like we are all in, whether it's business, sales, entrepreneurship, or whatever our background is, like there is a recognition that true sharpness comes from the Word of God, right? And in the context of your friendships, right, be someone that is sharpening each other. Like certain relationships, and being a man of youth once and having like being around people that were just talking about random stuff that added no value, I can say for a fact people either are making you sharp or making you dull, depending on who you're hanging out with. So hang out with people that are making you sharp. Whoever keeps the fig tree will eat its fruit, so he who waits on his master will be honored, right? Waiting is the act of service. If you are serving the people like in leadership or the people that are above you, I guarantee you that honor is your way, right? So whoever keeps the fig tree will eat its fruit, so he who waits on his master will be honored. Waiting at the fundamental level, if you guys are aware in the ancient world, like waiting on a master means, how can I serve? How can I help? Right? They will be honored, right? That's so important. What is our attitude of service? What is our attitude of waiting on someone, right? Because they're the ones who, when the hour comes for honoring, they receive it. As in the water, face reflects a man. As in water, face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. Everyone here listening live or on this call, if you get alone, your heart will reveal the kind of person that you are. If you get alone with yourself, as in the water, face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. You'll find out very quick, dang, like all the stuff of your heart will float to the surface. I guarantee you, the darknesses, dark skeletons or whatever will rise to the surface. The jealousies, the anger, the hatred, the pride, the envy, all of that, or even if it's just elements of that, you will pick it up very quickly. And maybe I'm the only one that's sitting alone and finding all these dark things, right? But at the end of the day, that's so important that you find it and you bring it to the Lord for him to handle it. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of a man are never satisfied, right? You know, Paul says, I've learned to be content in abundance, learned to be content in little, right? Contentment, you know, there's a thing. You should always be thankful, right? But your heart and your spirit will always desire to create more, right? But there's a negative sense of not being satisfied, and then there's a positive sense of not being satisfied. You should never be satisfied for righteousness. You should always desire more righteousness. You should never be satisfied like, you know, I'm done with God. No, you should always desire more of God, right? You see, there's positive and negative context, right? When it comes to the sin of the world, right, you're never satisfied. No amount of money in the world will never make you satisfied if you keep pursuing that route, right? But in this pursuit of good, right, you can never say, I've done X good, I'm satisfied. That in itself is a sin, right? I don't have to do any more good in this world, right? So you have to understand the context of where you're not being satisfied. And so the eyes of, so it is in the heart of a man. It's your spiritual nature. It's always going to be a creative flux, a creative capacity, because that's how you are made. You're made in God's image. You are created. God, the creator, creative beings, right? So we have the capacity to create. And so as a creative being, you're never going to reach a state of like, I'm done creating, right? That would be going against the fundamental nature of who you are made as. So very important to realize what's the context in which you are not being satisfied. And that's the question you have to answer for yourself. The last part of Proverbs 27, the refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, and a man is valued by what others say of him. Though you grind a fool in mortar and with a pestle along with crushed grain, yet his foolishness will not depart from him. Be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. For riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure all generations. When the hay is removed and tender grass shows itself, and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in, the lambs will provide your clothing and goats the price of your field. You shall have enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household, and nourishment for your maidservants. So multiple things here, right? Your value will be picked up by other people, right? People say, I don't care, I'm valuable. No, it doesn't matter what anybody says about me. True, right? But at the same time, the value that people see in you is seen by other people and what other people are saying about you, right? And so, you know, the next critical thing that you want to pick up here is be diligent with the resources that God has given you, right? There might be downturns, there might be upturns, there might be seasons where there's a lot, there might be seasons where there's a little, but like be aware of that and navigate those moments, right? Because that's where you're putting diligence to your resources and letting it work for you, not having, you know, you working for it. When the hay is removed and the tender grass shows itself and the herbs of the mountain are gathered in, the lambs will provide your clothing and the goats the price of a field. You shall have enough goat's milk for your food, for the food of your household and the nourishment of your maidservants. Diligence sustains. Let that sink in. Diligence sustains. Because you were diligent with the state of your flocks and attending to your herds, you realize that riches are not forever, but when the hay is removed and the tender grass shows itself and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in, when circumstances in life change, you'll still have enough. You know where you see that in the book of in the Genesis with Joseph, right? 7 years of plenty, 7 years of lack. But what he did in the years of plenty determined the health of his people in the years of lack. So it is with you. What you do when there's plenty will determine whether you have enough food for your household and the nourishment of your maidservants in a season that does not have as many resources. So that's pretty much it today. I'm going to open it up to you guys, questions, thoughts, feedback, and then we will transition out of here. We're all good, and we're all good.
All
right, dear Lord, I thank you so much for today. I pray that you would bless everyone on this call, those listening afterwards and those listening live, that you would give us wisdom and understanding that we might be effective agents throughout this world and in all that you're calling us to do. Give us a heart of wisdom that we might number our days, Lord. Thank you for all that you have done and all that you will continue to do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's rock and roll. Have a good day, guys. Bye.